Oh, hey, welcome to the very first installment of Because You're Watching. Now, I don't know a lot about this video uploading stuff because, well, old guy, and I'm not quite sure how this is all going to turn out. So, let's see where this goes. What will these videos be about? Not sure, but they will flirt with controversy. And we begin with Bridgerton, one of the most important shows in American TV movie history. Don't know about it? Where have you been? And no, this is not a review of that landmark series because, well, there's a lot of those out there. And I know I'm not the target audience for it. I'm pretty sure that Shonda Rhimes and her team weren't sitting in a conference room at the beginning and saying, with this one, we'll finally capture that senior black male demographic that's been so elusive. But all you guys out there, I gotta tell you, if you have a romantic bone anywhere in your body, Bridgerton will find it. So, you men and women haven't seen it, treat yourselves. Until then, a quick synopsis and a warning that there will be minor spoilers. Bridgerton is a period piece based on a series of romance novels. It's described as a combination of Downton Abbey, Pride and Prejudice, and Gossip Girls. Taking place in 1813 of the British Regency, it centers around the wealthy upper-class Bridgerton family, a mother and 8 children, 4 boys, 4 girls. The eldest daughter, Daphne, is coming out in British society and as such is eligible to receive suitors and seek out a noteworthy husband, her match. But she also wants to marry for love. At a society ball, she accidentally runs into Simon Bassett, the Duke of Hastings, best friend to her eldest brother when he was in college. Of course, initially, they don't hit it off. But due to a mutual solution to their separate societal complications, they form an alliance. This alliance leads to friendship, they fall in love, marry, and celebrate the birth of a child. Now, of course, there's much, much more to the story, but those are the essentials. It's a lush, well-crafted, straightforward, romantic tale. Now, the difference here is that Shonda Rhimes has created a world of diversity at every level. While race is recognized and acknowledged, the issues surrounding it have been overcome. Consequently, there are no racists or racism in the world of Bridgerton. Simon is black, Daphne is white. But this is not what makes the show important. To answer that question, an overview of how black-white romance has been presented for public consumption in American entertainment is necessary. This may take a few minutes. There's about 70 years to cover. Historically, the relationship between blacks and whites has been, to put it extremely mild, complicated. Besides the obvious, there's been a together but apart dynamic that has been detrimental to all concerned. While same-gender friendships were allowed, romance between blacks and whites was forbidden. Now, this wasn't true across the board. There were acceptable races, relationships, and they were represented in movies by Mexican-American Ricardo Montalban, Argentinian Fernando Lamas, Cuban-born Desi Arnaz, among others. Their characters were allowed to romance, marry, and have children with their female co-stars to little consequence. Now, in society, a white male involved with a black female could be seen as a well-known secret or male dalliances. But any hint of interest between a black male and a white female often led to deadly consequences. And this is the combination we will be focusing on. Not only because it has been the most resisted, but it's at the very center of Bridgerton. Needless to say, due to the risks of violent pushback, producers of movies and eventually TV resisted presenting these relationships to the public until 1957, when 20th Century Fox would release its all-star ensemble movie, Island in the Sun. Based on the novel, it takes place on a fictitious Caribbean island and contains 3 romantic couples of different racial iterations. A white couple, white male, black female couple, black male, white female couple. Now, that particular couple is portrayed by a very popular Harry Belafonte and Joan Fontaine, real-life sister to Olivia de Havilland, whom we know from Gone with the Wind. How these couples are portrayed during the movie and where they wind up by its end represents a hierarchy of interracial acceptance in society. The white couple get to romance. They spend an unchaperoned night in a big estate house, express their love for one another, kiss, and by all evidence, do much more than that. And by the end of the movie, they get married off screen and we see them fly off happily to England, happily ever after. The white male, black female couple, cute flirtation, a slow dance, a touch of romance, no kissing. He expresses his love for her. They get married off screen, and we see them fly off to England to live happily ever after. The black male, white female couple, Belafonte and Fontaine, well, calling their relationship a romance is a bit of a stretch. They have some chaste flirtation, but that's about it. They don't even get to hold hands, let alone anything else. They touch only once, but not in a romantic way. And by the end of the movie, they have a disagreement and go their separate ways. Now, Belafonte's character in the movie actually describes this hierarchy as to one of the reasons why they cannot go off to England and live happily. By the end of the movie, we see him walk off alone down a dirt path. Now, Island in the Sun has several audacious things to say about race in relation to power and politics, but not so much romance, other than, yeah, it's out there. 2 years later, 1959, Belafonte would star with Swedish-American actress Inger Stevens in MGM's The World, the Flesh, and the Devil. This movie boldly posits the question, what if the last man on earth were black? Yeah, 48 years before Will Smith in I Am Legend. Belafonte's character finds himself alone in New York City. And like the Smith character, he begins to set himself up. After a certain amount of time, in a moment of despair, he realizes that he's not alone when Stevens' character reveals herself to him. He helps her set up in a nearby building, because heaven forbid she should set up in a different floor in the same building as he. They keep each other company and grow closer. She expresses an interest in something more, but he feels that due to social norms and ensuing complications, that they can't go any further. And so, although he's attracted to her, he distances himself from her. Now, this points to something of a bit greater concern that I'll get to a little bit later. But the question here is what issues is he afraid of? There is no society, no norms, and no one around to create any complications between them. Well, while not giving too much away about the ending, although the relationship does not progress any further, the movie ends on a positive note. It would be 6 years before Hollywood would dip its toes in the interracial waters. 1965 would bring us another popular actor, Sidney Poitier, co-starring with Shelley Winters and Elizabeth Hartman for the emotional and touching A Patch of Blue. In it, Hartman plays a young woman blinded as a girl, whose life is complicated by her dependence on her abusive mother and alcoholic grandfather. She meets Sidney Poitier's character when he stops to help her string beads for jewelry she makes for money. They agree to meet regularly in the park, and he teaches her a few tips on being a little more independent. They grow closer together until she reveals her feelings for him. During a moment of passion, she even innocently propositions him, at which point he doesn't feel that they can go any further because of what he feels she needs for herself. And he takes responsibility for setting up this help. And in so doing, they have to separate, at least for a time. The ending is bittersweet but hopeful. A year later, Sidney Poitier would co-star with Spencer Tracy, Katharine Hepburn, and Hepburn's real-life niece, Catherine Houghton, for the social statement movie that is Guess Who's Coming to Dinner. Now, of course, not much needs to be said about this movie, except that it's not a romance, it's not a drama, it's not a character study, and it's certainly not a comedy. What it is a definite and clear message movie, and almost everything in it is in service to that message. The couple are the catalyst for it, as well as the message itself, which is nicely articulated by Spencer Tracy by the movie's positive conclusion. There is one side note, however. There is a rather passionate moment between Portier and Houghton's character as they kiss in the back of a cab. This scene is usually excised, or was usually excised from the movie for household showings. Now, 42 years later, this would be similar when Will Smith and Charlize Theron would have their kiss edited out of the theatrical release of Hancock. 2 years following the release of Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, 1968, television would take its first tentative steps toward the interracial waters in the most timid way possible, with a kiss between Captain Kirk and Lieutenant Uhura in an episode of Star Trek. Gene Roddenberry and his team really hedged their bets on this one. Not only is this between the most acceptable iteration of the black-white combinations, a white male and a black female, but the two characters are forced into this. They have no choice. On top of that, technically, the moment is shot from an angle, and if you look closely, their lips aren't touching in any significant way. However, this was so revolutionary, it is still being referenced. Now, over the next few years, the black male, white female combination would find its way into soul cinema movies. However, these one-off physical couplings were more empowerment statements than anything that actually resembled a relationship. Television would continue to resist this combination for quite some time, not only due to the pushback from a predictable clutch of white viewers, but from certain groups of black viewers as well, most notably women. Now, this was somewhat tribal in nature because they felt that their white counterparts were stealing from an already limited stock. Denzel Washington would refer to this as one of the reasons he is never seen romancing his white female co-stars in any of his movies. Strangely, this puts them all on the same page as white racists who have the idea that we should all stick with our own kind. It has them joining these white supremacists by not wanting to present these relationships to the public, even though they were a part of society. This circles back to the decision Belafonte's character makes in The Will of the Flesh of the Devil in distancing himself from the Stevens character. And that is the act of self-limitation, an aspect of which is a person or a group of people no longer has to expend the energy to control the behavior of another person or group of people because they will limit themselves. There is a common American narrative, the story, where in movies and television, where if you have an attractive male and an attractive female in the same story, that sooner or later they're going to wind up together. Now the question here is, how does Denzel Washington and other black actors acquire the power to avoid this? And the answer is, they didn't. Producers are only too happy not to have to deal with the racial fallout. They no longer have to expend the energy because they were let off the hook. The producers, the actors, and certain groups of fans are all on the same page. And Denzel Washington, Morgan Freeman, Danny Glover, Cuba Gooding Jr., Chadwick Boseman, Lawrence Tate, Will Smith, pick one. These actors are free by the nature of their race from that romantic obligation. Now, from 1965 over the next 3.5 to 4 decades, the black male, white female coupling would dot the landscape and usually fall into one of several narratives. The relationship was a one-off, usually to send a social, political message or for shock value. The relationship starts and ends tragically. The relationship starts and for various reasons ends. Now, this one can be attributed to producers testing the waters, getting the predictable pushback, and deciding it wasn't worth it, and going back to the status quo. The last narrative, the couple is presented full blown, completely settled, usually friends of the lead character, or they're diluted in an ensemble, like some kind of group date, but they are rarely at the center of the show's concept. This couple, while romantic perhaps, have little or no passion, but they are functional and content. Now, in recent years, there has been one show that has created its own convention, and that is The Good Place. The relationships are handled wonderfully, but those people are dead. Over the history of TV, the number of black male, white female romances lasting more than a few episodes has been small. There have only been two shows that have had this coupling at its very center. One of them was a dramedy that lasted only one season and didn't get a chance to even explore the relationship. The second was a Brady Bunch style concoction that was also canceled in its first season. And this brings us to Bridgerton. Now, Shonda Rhimes has not only avoided the usual toe dipping, she has taken a running leap and plunged right into the waters. We get a complete interracial relationship unfettered. The viewer is invited to follow a young white woman and a young black man from first meeting through growing attraction, falling passionately in love, getting married, and celebrating the birth of their first child. Now, let's remember that race is acknowledged in the world of Bridgerton. It's just that none of the characters care much about it, and neither do we. So, devoid of this baggage, Simon and Daphne's relationship is presented as two people passionate for each other. It's a love affair that involves what has traditionally been the most contentious and dangerous interracial combination at its very center, the very center of the story. It is brought full, successful, and happy into American households. We've never seen this before. Oh, yeah, because we've been exposed to the various previous narratives or heard their expositions and had our minds piece these things together like a jigsaw puzzle, we think we've seen it, but we really haven't. It's never been done. Tens of millions of people were drawn in and became emotionally involved in Simon and Daphne's journey. Tens of millions more witnessed their intense physical intimacy, not once, but numerous times. None of this one and done, so typical of previous shows that boldly explored this territory. There was a montage. Even millions more joined in joyous celebration of the birth of their unambiguously mixed son. Now, children of such relationships are as rare as rubies. And this large number embraced this relationship, rooted for its success, and cried for more. Such expressions of love and passion between two characters were typically reserved for white couples. And with its wide exposure and success, Bridgerton becomes capable of changing hearts and minds, altering the perception of how blacks and whites can relate to be seen relating to one another in the most substantive of ways, closing the artificial gaps in the racial landscape, and challenging producers of entertainment content. Now, I don't know if Miss Rhimes had such a lofty goal, or if this is merely the next logical step in her successful career of presenting diversity. But she and her team have created a revolutionary show in the form of a thoroughly engaging romance whose social message is not in the narrative itself, but in its presentation. For the first time, Americans see a devoted, ardent relationship between a black man and white woman fully realized in the most accessible of stories. Now, the impact of this is far reaching. Whether you love the show or think it's just so, doesn't really matter. To make a broad comparison to an aspect of quantum theory, simply observing causes change. And that's why Bridgerton is one of the most important shows in American TV movie history. Thank you for sticking with me. And remember, I'm doing this because you're watching. Take care.